We are those guys. You see these guys over there? Don't forget about those guys. I'm Alex Hardy, joined as always my man Nick Ferguson, former 10-year NFL safety. You can find him at Nick Ferguson _25, the latest and greatest within the NFL. And we're here. Week 15 gets kicked off. We've got the Falcons upsetting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 29-28 on Thursday night. And we've got a wide open NFC South, which we will get to, knowing that we have another NFC South matchup come Sunday. What's going on, Nick Ferguson?
Nothing much, man. What's going on with you?
Well, Tampa looked like they were not necessarily going to run away, but it is midway through the third quarter. They have themselves a touchdown lead, and Atlanta just doesn't have that quit in them. Kirk Cousins brought them back, didn't he?
Yeah, it was somewhat of vintage Kirk Cousins. We've seen this before, but as I say that, yes, we've seen this before from Kirk Cousins and meaningless games. That's the biggest thing to point out for Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah, they win the game, but it's meaningless. It means absolutely nothing. If you wanted to take something away from it, you could say, well, yeah, they kind of stuck a dagger in Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers, and I had the Buccaneers actually winning this game, but you're right.
Sure. They were the better team throughout the year.
Right. There was no quit in this Falcons team. But what happens is we see teams play well after maybe a coordinator gets fired or a head coach getting fired. Or in this situation with the Falcons, they have absolutely nothing to play for. And the only thing they are playing for, if anything, is they want to play spoiler. And they might have done that to one of their division rivals tonight.
Yeah. So listen, it wasn't a perfect game by all means, but they did just enough to win. I mean, one thing that has plagued this Falcons team is mistakes. The number of penalties, I think, was it 19 penalties for 125 yards, and somehow they win this game. It also goes to show that even if they weren't the most efficient on third down, those are the types of areas that you win football games. You win the turnover battle, you don't commit penalties, and you can convert in the high leverage situations. They didn't really do any of that, except for that fourth quarter when they overcame a 14-point deficit. It got as bad as 2 touchdowns, but they did it through opportune moments on offense. You said vintage Kirk Cousins, and meanwhile on the defense, they got after Baker Mayfield, and it's a lucky bounce of the football too. There was that late fumble recovery that you thought Hassan Reddick had recovered, Hassan Reddick had forced the sack, forced the fumble, but the Falcons were able to keep possession and keep that game alive. But the late fourth down conversion, Kyle Pitts being the focal point of this offense without Drake London. I mean, here's a guy who's looking to cash in, set to hit free agency. Kyle Pitts, man, 11 catches, 166 yards, and 3 tutties. I've seen completely swing the momentum. It's only Thursday, but for fantasy football opening playoff matchups, the Kyle Pitts teams, man, those were the underdogs. Those are the guys that are like the 6 seeds that look like they're going to upset for their fantasy leagues.
You know what? This reminds me of what I've seen here with the Denver Broncos with Evan Ingram. Like this whole time, the Broncos were like, well, we need a Kyle Pitts type of tight end. And at one point, I thought the Broncos were going to trade for Kyle Pitts, but they signed Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram had a monster game, his first 100-yard game of the season against the Washington Commanders. And now we see Kyle Pitts in the game that means absolutely nothing go off. And you got to be thinking, if you're a Falcons fan, right, you have to be thinking, pulling out your hair, screaming, throwing things at the television, saying, where in the hell was this the entire season? Because imagine, you got Bijan running the ball. You have Drake London, when he's healthy, out there kept pass catching. And then you have another threat in between the hashes with Kyle Pitts. I mean, the season could have been entirely different for the Atlanta Falcons, but all it took was Drake London not playing in the game tonight and being a scratch to find a way to feature Kyle Pitts. That makes absolutely no sense to me, but he did put up some huge fantasy numbers tonight.
Selfishly, I'd like to think if Drake London and this team were playing on Sunday, he'd have been available. But the quick turnaround just didn't seem like it was going to happen. And you gotta at least practice, unless of course you're Amon-Ra St. Brown. But you keep saying they're playing for nothing, and
What are they
to a
playing
certain
for?
point, yeah. Well, I'm saying to a certain point you're correct, and then you think, well, if they continue to lose games, they could tank and get that better draft pick. Oh no, that's right. The L.A. Rams have that draft pick because they traded back into the first round. And don't get me wrong, like James Pierce recorded a couple of sacks. The other rookie first rounder, Jalen Walker, had a sack as well. They've seemed to got a pair of premium pass rushers at a premium position that are cheap and under contract. But barring any more meaningless victories for this Falcons team, Nick, it's really hard to believe that what they gave up and what could be a top anywhere between the 10th and the 15th overall pick come next April. It just doesn't seem like it's worth it. It's a philosophical difference, I think, really, because you have a coach and a GM on the hot seat, and they're making very, very pivotal decisions that are directly affecting the outcome of this franchise for years to come. It's a philosophy I'm not necessarily behind. Look, I'm not trying to kick anybody out the door, but Raheem Morris, if he finishes 6-11, or even if this team wins out at 8-9, I'm not necessarily saying that he's safe or guaranteed to have a season next year, let alone with the front office as well and the job that they're getting out of Terry Fontenot, who in 4 years hasn't really given this team enough of a lift to improve them, especially at the quarterback position.
Well, what he did give them, he gave them Michael Penix, and who had an injury history, and then he also
And continues to. He has an
right,
injury history and an injury present as well, Nick.
right, and then he gave them, Kirk Cousins, a guy that you overpaid for, then you can't really get rid of because you gave him too much money. But he comes up and he's very serviceable because that's the type of quarterback he is. He's that serviceable quarterback that can come in and give you hope and say, man, if we had this guy at the start of the season, things would be so different. But you did have him at the start of the season, and things still didn't look good for this Atlanta Falcons team. The only thing that I can say, man, being a former player and coach in this league, is the fact that, listen, you want to win every single game. And when Fontenot and Raheem being in the position that they're in, you want to show owner Arthur Blank that, you know what? It's not how you start, it's how you finish. Even though it's not putting us in the playoffs, you just want to show that, hey, we're making some changes, we're turning the corner, and albeit it's not for a playoff appearance, but you want to make sure that, hey, you show that you didn't give up on the season. Tonight was one of those things that give indicators that you didn't give up. But I'll say this, Alex. I think this tonight's result was a case of more of Tampa Bay losing the game opposed to the Falcons winning the game.
Well, let's go there because they lose to New Orleans a week ago, and now they come back and lose to Atlanta. They've lost the driver's seat in the NFC South, and they seem to be free falling. We could blame injuries, and they get Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan back, both huge contributors in the box score, but it doesn't translate to a victory because of the issues that they continue to have on their offensive line, and the way that defense just was allowing chunk after chunk play in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that was kind of disappointing to see what they gave up, especially on that 4th and 14. It was like 40 seconds remaining in the game. The ball was, I
That's
think,
right.
at the
Third
45
and
yard line.
28, fourth and 14,
I am
back-to-back plays.
screaming, and I think I must have said every swear word that I know, some of which probably are not in the English dictionary, yelling at the corner, what the hell are you doing? You have a single receiver in a minus split, and the back is set off to you. You have one job only. Make sure that receiver releases inside you. He couldn't even do that, Alex. He couldn't
Yeah,
even do that. And I'm not saying that the game came down to that particular play, and it should never have come down to that particular
right.
play. But defensively, the Bucs should have made plays that they didn't. That's why I said the results are more about what the Bucs didn't do opposed to what the Falcons actually did.
Well, that team is free falling, right? They go up 28-14. They're up 14 points, and they let the Falcons drive back-to-back touchdowns. And meanwhile, Baker is, to his credit, God love him, he's got a Mike Evans 1,000 yards season to take care of in the next 4 games. But he's forcing this ball up to Mike Evans, and they just put themselves in a bad spot where they give the Falcons a quick turnaround. They continue to have that momentum, and the reality is with premium position and a 2-score lead, they just let Atlanta drive down the field at will, and they have, I believe, 1 first down in their next 2 possessions and let Atlanta just walk off with that game. So they have serious issues, and the Carolina Panthers, who we'll get to shortly, not because they've got a great matchup, but it looks as if they could be a full game ahead in the NFC South, where Tampa has to take care of their business moving forward. They get Carolina 2 of the last 3 games, so we're going to talk a lot of NFC South on this pod moving forward, and we will just kind of pump the brakes. You can't assume a win against Tyler Shuck and the Saints anymore, given that's what we wanted to do with Tampa a week ago. But Carolina does go to New Orleans. Bryce Young is looking to bounce back in a way that, a couple of times this game he can be one of the league's best, but they're coming off of that upset victory against the Rams. Like, this NFC South is wide open, and I think it might be best to talk about this matchup in particular when we see Tampa and Carolina a week from now. So I'm excited for the rest of the Week 15 slate. Of course, I want to do Buffalo, New England, but I will cater to Nick Ferguson. He
No,
is the
no,
pro.
no, 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 no. Let's do this. Buffalo, the New England Patriots. Let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay, hat
First.
and T-shirt game for my
Yes.
Patriots. They beat Buffalo at home. They get a hat. They get a T-shirt that says AFC East champs, Nick. How does this one set up?
Well, I don't know if the Pats are going to get those AFC shirts because the Broncos still have something to say about it. But what I would
No,
say,
just the division, not the one
oh,
seed. At least the
oh,
AFC
okay,
East.
okay. Oh, of
Yeah.
course, yes, yes. They definitely do that, and that's one of the bigger games of the week for me because it has so many implications. Because the Patriots are trying to get that number 1 seed because they know the Broncos are chasing them. The Bills, they're hoping coming off a big win against Cincinnati, they want to keep themselves in the mix, and they want to make sure they stay out of the bottom of the seeding because they don't want to have to play, in any of the top teams. They want somewhat of an easy road. So this is going to be a really interesting game, considering the fact that when you think about Drake May, what they did early on in the season, they actually beat the Bills on their home turf. So the Bills are
Right.
looking for a little get back, right? They circled this game. Sean McDermott, he's upset. He wants some get back. They're like, hey, we let him out. The doors were closed, right? But somehow they got to lose and they got out. But they're not going to get out this time. That's what he's telling his team. And Josh Allen, right? A guy who during the preseason everyone was talking about him, Lamar, Patrick Mahomes, being there at the end. And it's a situation where it doesn't look like most of these teams are going to make it. So this is an opportunity for Josh Allen and the Bills to somewhat turn the corner.
Well, you think they have the momentum with the second half against Cincinnati, but that first half still exists. The turnovers that they force still exist, and that Week 5 matchup. This was 6-3 going into halftime with the Patriots not getting a first down, I believe, until their third drive of the game. They get the ball back from Buffalo at the 10-yard line and have to settle for a field goal. Like, this was just a Patriots team that was still finding its way. Recently had lost to the Raiders and the Steelers leading up to this, but they're a completely different team. Whereas Buffalo seems to have some of the same issues with poor execution on the offensive end and allowing big shot plays on defense as we continue along. Like, this Cincinnati Bengals team has better weapons than most of the other teams in the AFC. However, Buffalo was allowing them to hang around and not really separating themselves from that defense until much later on in the game. So neither team has been able to put together 4 quarters, but it's the most efficient team and the team that is capable and comfortable of making those big plays that could separate them. And I guess that means that the most accurate deep ball thrower in Drake May has the advantage there. But at the same time, Buffalo, if they stick to their script and can run the football, and it's not Josh Allen hero ball, they could easily take this game away too. We're talking about the difference of the Patriots not only clinching, they'd create a 3-game lead in the AFC East, and if Buffalo wins, it's just one game between them.
Well, I'm sure that's what Buffalo is thinking. But the one thing that we do know, and we've seen this movie before, we're not going to see a M. Night Shyamalan type of ending. And what I'm talking about is Josh Allen once again throwing on the cape, because for him, it's the reputation that is up for grabs, right? He prides himself of being the man of Buffalo, and he knows he's in that conversation with so many other quarterbacks. He now has to take his game to the next level, because if he doesn't take his game to the next level over the next couple of years, he's going to be talked about like some of the other quarterbacks who possibly made it to the postseason, right? Like a Dan Marino or Dan Fouts, right? Just kind of one of those almost type of guys. And he's still putting up numbers that would probably get him into the Hall of Fame at some point. But the biggest thing for him, he's got to overcome the ghost of Buffalo past. That's right, Jim Kelly and those failed Super Bowl by the Buffalo Bills. And oh, by the way, even though Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs are probably not going to make the playoffs this year, he's still battling the ghost of the postseason against Patrick Mahomes. So he's weighing, just think about that, Alex. You're going into this game, and it's a must-win game for you. Like the Pats can afford to drop a game. They don't want to, but they can afford to drop a game.
Mm-hmm.
The Bills, they cannot. And especially losing to the Pats and giving Pats the leverage over them, like 2 games, they cannot do this. So Josh is going to throw on the cape. And here's what I've seen. When Josh throws on the cape, he's going to do all those Josh Allen types of things, but the Buffalo Bills are not going to win. So he's got to share the wealth. Can he do that? Do you think Josh Allen can do that? Tell me, Alex, do you think he can do that?
That's not entirely up to Josh Allen. I think he's only going to do it out of necessity. He's smarter than that. But are they going to stay committed to the run game? If the Patriots can pull off a couple of big plays and they're up 3-10, can they stay committed to the run game? I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that Christian Barmore returning would be huge for that defensive line and that run defense. So we'll have to wait and see. Speaking of Christian Bedford was the pop up on the Bills injury report this week. He, of course, had the game-sealing pick 6 a week ago against Cincy. So key defensive players that are up in the air a little bit, which will be kind of exciting to see heading in towards the weekend. Meanwhile, Nick, I was going to placate to you because the other 11-win team has a matchup of their own. The Denver Broncos, your Denver Broncos, are home dogs against the Green Bay Packers. Is that just an ultimate sign of disrespect, or is it just Toyotathon Jordan Love playing out of his mind right now has been a better quarterback than Bo Nix?
Well, I'll say it's part of the national narrative. And, I totally understand it. I mean, the Broncos offense really hasn't really been that explosive. And I know around these parts, the word I constantly hear, well, the Broncos dominated the Raiders. You were supposed to do that. They were a 2-10 team. And then you look at the time of possession. The time of possession, there was a difference of, I believe, 19 minutes. And everyone's like, yay, yay. I'm like, look, I wouldn't call it a dominating performance because you scored 7 points in the first, 7 points in the third, 3 points in the fourth quarter. And oh, by the way, your only points of the second quarter was a Marvin Mims punt return. That's not domination, right? That's not domination. What that is it's showing efficiency. It showed like for the first time this season, the Broncos offense was efficient, albeit against the Raiders. You can't pick and choose who you play, but the Broncos offense, they were efficient. Now, there were not a lot of explosive pass plays, and Bo Nix had to show that he can nickel and dime. That's a confidence booster, right? That's something that the Broncos haven't really shown. Also, there were 2 things that happened in the game against the Raiders that hadn't happened all season for the Broncos. The first one was an opening drive touchdown by the Denver Broncos offense, right? The second one was the Broncos defense giving up a first drive touchdown. Those 2 things hadn't happened all season long. So I'm going to call those types of things anomalies. But I'm going to say that the team won the game, but they were efficient. But it's a bigger task for them against the Green Bay Packers on Sunday.
This is such a huge moment for Green Bay, right? They come off with the emotional victory against Chicago. They go to Mile High in Denver, and then they get the Bears again. It's like this game sets up for the battle for the North, knowing that the Lions are there too, but you can't overlook this Denver Broncos team. They may even be better than the Chicago Bears team they're playing twice in the last 3 weeks. So this game is so critical for them, but there's so many unknowns when it comes to Denver from Green Bay's perspective. How that line holds up with Micah Parsons and that pass rush. Christian Watson, who tore his ACL less than a year ago, having one of the fastest miles per hour run times a week ago in that Bears victory. I just this is strength on strength with these teams. You have a bevy of receivers, none of them exceptional, facing a Broncos secondary that is among the league's best. You've got quality offensive linemen on both ends and great pass rushers on the other end. I mentioned Micah, Nick Bonito. I am just so excited to see what Green Bay kind of makes of this game. Are they going to push all the chips in? Are they capable of playing these high leverage, extremely emotional games? Chicago, Denver, Chicago again? Or is it just focus on the games that you have in the North? You're in the driver's seat if you can beat the Bears twice. I'm just excited to see where the rubber kind of meets the road here.
Well, if you are, the Green Bay Packers, the idea is that you focus on the Denver Broncos first. That's your opponent on Sunday, because if you're looking past the Denver Broncos and looking ahead to your next meeting with the Chicago Bears, to me, your mind is in the wrong place. And when your mind is not in the wrong place, one, you can get hurt, and two, you can lose games. So I am thinking that Matt LaFleur is going to have his team thinking solely on this game. You've already beaten Chicago, right? Next time Chicago has to come to your place to play you. They're now on your home turf. But keep the main thing the main thing. You're playing the Denver Broncos, and the idea is that, which Green Bay Packer team are you going to get? Like you
Right.
talk about the Christian Watson team, what he was able to do, and the explosive touchdowns, which is great, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's been out multiple games, and he's only been playing 7 games, but he's like the third or the second leading receiver in yards for the Green Bay
Mm-hmm.
Packers. That says a
Yeah.
lot. That says a lot for him. But the idea is knowing as though you're competing with this Broncos defense. Don't even say, well, it's Jordan Love versus Bo Nix. No, it's not. It's Jordan Love versus the Broncos defense. And the one thing I know about Jordan Love, he's come a long way from that game that we saw. I think it was Sunday Night Football when they played the Philadelphia at home, where it was more of a defensive type game, those types of
Mm-hmm.
games that I love. But staying and keeping the offense on rhythm. But more importantly, this is where good quarterbacks become great quarterbacks. When you make plays in the red zone, but more important, you keep the drive moving on third down. And he's been really sensational on third down since that Phillies game.
Yep, 4 in a row. They've been sensational in all areas offensively, averaging north of 25 points a game against quality opponents. Well, at least in the last 2 weeks against the Lions and Bears, the Giants and the Vikings. Maybe not so much, but they do get
Mhm.
Minnesota to wrap up the season. And look, no one would be happier to play spoiler than Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings. Do you want to round out the West? You got a Chiefs Chargers battle. The Chiefs season is essentially over. We talked about that after Sunday Night Football. They would be happy to play spoiler as well. But again, this is kind of where their season started. Week 1 in Brazil, the
Mhm.
Chargers beat the Chiefs and send themselves on this trajectory, whereas Kansas City, it looked as if this wasn't the same team we've been used to, not even a year ago, right? That was the first of many one-score matchups that they just couldn't get on the right side of. So I'm going to kind of put a pin in on that one because it might be an ugly game. Banged up Justin Herbert, banged up Chargers and Chiefs offense. Is there somewhere else you'd like to go, Nick? Do you want to do the battle of the Lions and the Rams, revisiting the Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford trade, Or do we want to talk about 44-year-old Philip Rivers? Because this man's going to start against Seattle on Sunday.
Well, let's start with 44-year-old Philip Rivers. I applaud him as a guy that played back in my era, getting another opportunity. Good for him. Now the only thing is that well, when I played against him, he couldn't run then, and I'm sure the fact that he's been out of the game for 5 years, he still can't run now. So if I'm Coach McDonald's, I'm gonna test him out, right? If he ends up starting or playing at some point in the game, I'm gonna test him out. I might just send a blitz, double A guy blitz, just off the bat to see if he can move his body and get outside the pocket. Because the one thing that's very interesting about Philip Rivers, he is a competitor. We all know about his trash talking, but that awkward shot put throwing type of motion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to think he knows Shane Steichen's offense, but he hasn't really played against NFL talent in a while. So he's going to
He
have to
was
get
eligible
himself.
for the Hall of Fame, Nick. It's been half a dozen years.
I know. And now if he goes in, he plays the game, now you got to push it back to what, 2031 or something like that. But it's going to be interesting to see how he holds up, but more importantly, his body. That's the thing. If he, I guess, undergoes a certain amount of sacks, what is it going to be like, after the game? His body's going to be sore as hell.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like he was going through a full practice all week just to see how even some light contact and throwing on pads. I mean, unless he's throwing on pads, working in drills for the high school team this year, just doing the physical activity. Like there are going to be aches and pains well before you go full contact on Sunday, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing how his body kind of takes care of itself, being built like one of those water birds that dip in that are all top heavy with those pencil legs, not necessarily going to serve him well. But it's a Colts team that this reeks of desperation, right? This is a moment where Anthony Richardson's supposed to be prepared and ready, but he broke his face with a resistance band. Riley Leonard, I would like to think, Notre Dame fans need a silver lining after their team didn't make the playoff. Riley Leonard would be playing this game if he wasn't injured. So do we get Philip Rivers for just the game, just this game? Is this kind of his one moment where he can put the team on his back and upset a Mike McDonald defense? I'm just not so sure given Indianapolis's issues all over the rest of the field. They trade their they don't have a draft pick until 2028 in the first round. And Daniel Jones, he might not. We've talked about this. He's not going to start next year. This is a team that maybe Philip Rivers might be their best option at quarterback when he's 45 years old next year. So I'm really worried about the outlook of the Colts. And as fun of a story as this is, and I always think of like Mercedes Lewis as a good example, just cut by
Mm-hmm.
your Broncos. Like Philip Rivers is the last vestige that ties a Nick Ferguson to the active NFL. These are guys that you competed and played against. Like, the 2006 draft class with Aaron Rodgers. Like, you still hearken and think back to those days as long as those guys are still suiting up and playing. So I'm getting a little romantic here, Nick, but this could be an ugly game against Seattle.
Well, you know what? The NFL has built itself on branding and storylines. And what one hell of a storyline would it be, right? If Philip Rivers were to go out and have a great game, but it would get even better if he wins the freaking game. Just think about that because here it becomes the narrative. You just talked about Aaron Rodgers, who is an older quarterback. We just saw Joe Flacco get traded from Cleveland to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he won a couple of games. Could you imagine? I mean, Philip Rivers coming off the sofa after 5 years outside the game. He has a decent game, and then oh, by the way, they win the game. All these teams that may feel as though they have quarterback issues, I would bet you if Philip Rivers won the game, you're going to have someone in NFL organization saying, you know what? Maybe we're thinking about this all the wrong way. We all put all this stock in some of these, rookie quarterbacks and all of that. Is it time to now turn back time and get some of the previous quarterbacks and run it back? And I know one quarterback who was salty. I'm talking about saltine cracker
Oh, we're going to
salty,
go here?
right? But Cam Newton was upset that how dare they Don't they know that I'm Cam Newton? And they went out and grabbed a 44-year-old quarterback when I'm sitting right here. So I'm for all that conversation.
Right. Let's just open the window and say, like, if a 44-year-old quarterback, this 44-year-old quarterback could compete, maybe some other guys outside of Cam Newton will delude themselves into thinking, I can play into an advanced age. That is something I can do.
Wait a
Listen,
minute.
this is,
Wait a minute. Your guy, Tom Brady, right? He, he,
yep,
he played into his 40s, right?
right,
He won a
yep.
Super Bowl, right?
He'd be better served playing quarterback for the Raiders than making the front office decisions. I'll tell you that much.
Hey, like I told you, if Philip Rivers goes out and he plays well, it's a greater story if he wins, but it's still a great story nonetheless if he goes out there and he puts up numbers. Everyone's going to start looking around and say, hey, man, maybe we need to go find out, what quarterback is out there who's been retired 2 or 3 years that we can bring back. That's going to be a conversation.
If it's the Colts, they just have to make sure the guy can handle the snap and turn around and hand the ball to Jonathan Taylor. It's going to be hard against a Seattle Seahawks defense that hasn't allowed a 100-yard rusher since the year 2024, but streaks are meant to be broken. Just because nobody's put up 100 on them in 22 games doesn't mean that Jonathan Taylor, the NFL's leading rusher, can't. If he can do that, the Colts have a puncher's chance against Seattle. I teased it. Lions-Rams, revisiting this Jared Goff-Matthew Stafford trade. Very rarely do we get a win-win type of scenario because not only was Detroit able to build on the quarterback Jared Goff, but the draft capital that came with it, including picks like Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. And these teams are, and of course, LA got their chip, and they're in the driver's seat in the NFC right now. So I love this game. It's a high total. It's at SoFi Stadium. It's going to be a battle of wits. Dan Campbell and Sean McVay. How do you see this one playing, especially given the injury setbacks for the Lions defense? A second year in a row. This time they're now missing Brian Branch with the torn Achilles.
Yeah, I'm going to give the nod to the home team in the LA Rams. You know what? The Rams may be on a collision course for another trip, but this time, instead of playing in their home stadium, they're going to go to NFC rivals San Francisco and play in their stadium. And that would be something I know John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, they're definitely not looking forward to. So there's a lot to get to before we get to that point. But I feel as though the Rams offensively, man, they have some weapons. And it's going to be a great game because this could be one of those games, well, who's the first to 40, right? It could be one of those types of games because when you look at what each team does well, I mean, when you look at Detroit, they got 2 running backs, right? I don't know what they call them, Sonic and what's the other one?
Sonic and Knuckles.
Sonic and Knuckles. And I can tell you, man, Jahmyr Gibbs, he can go. That dude is a big play waiting to happen. So you couple that with the slow, methodical, quick-hitting game of the Rams with Blake Corum and Kyron Williams, it's going to be really, really interesting and a real test for both teams. But I still have Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford coming out on top.
Shout out Sunday Night Football, the Vikings and the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb looking like a full go despite suffering the concussion last week, which is very encouraging. Meanwhile, what's going to give first here? The 9 alter ego J.J. McCarthy or the fact that the Dallas Cowboys have one of the worst pass defenses in the league? Quickly touching on Sunday Night Football, where you will find us, those guys, following the Week 15 action.
Well, that Dallas Cowboys defense is one of the worst. And the other team that's worse than them would be the Cincinnati Bengals. But I think this is a game that they kind of raise the bar just a little because when you look at the Vikings, they've been having trouble offensively, right? And J.J. McCarthy is like the stock market, right? Or he's like a 64 Impala, right? Up and down, up and down.
Right. I was going to say maybe in 2008 he is.
Yeah, right. he's so up and down, and it makes you wonder, well, are the Vikings realizing that they made a mistake not keeping Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones? Possibly. But
definitely.
This is a game that's going to be tough for the Minnesota Vikings because you can see the body language. Justin Jefferson is upset. He's upset because Here's a guy who he's used to getting those high numbers. He's not getting those high numbers, and he's watching other receivers, actually pull that off. And when you think about it, the Cowboys are very talented. They got 1,000-yard rusher in Javonte Williams, something that Javonte didn't do when he was a member of the Broncos, but
Yeah.
that's a whole nother story. And I'm surprised that CeeDee Lamb actually passed concussion protocol. Usually that's 2 games right there.
Yeah.
But when Jerry Jones is your coach and he knows how important games are, get back out there and play.
Don't forget, coach, GM, head medical trainer, because he's always got
Yes.
an opinion on the injuries, and leave it to him to get CD back in the action. He's Nick Ferguson. I'm Alex Hardy. We are those guys. You see these guys over there? Don't forget those guys. We are continuing to bring you live updates throughout the remaining NFL season. And look, the holidays are here, Nick. So, I mean,
Yes.
I want to get you out on this. What is your favorite Christmas tradition as we're now sitting about 2 weeks out? And I know you're going to say something to the effect of going out shopping, wrapping the presents, and baking cookies. Those are your 3 favorite things around the Christmas holiday.
More, man, you know me very well, don't you? No, those are not my things. It's just kind of hanging out, chilling with the family, maybe watching, Home Alone 1 and 2.
Is that the movie?
Anything-
What's on your short list for holiday movies?
Well, obviously, I think it was Shrek Christmas, right? Shrek the Halls, right? You can't go without this Shrek the Halls. Uh, you have both the movies, Home Alone 1 and 2. Anything else after that Home Alone related, you don't want to watch it. And then, of course, the ultimate holiday movie of all time, Die Hard.
Die Hard. Absolutely. I saw somebody grab. We're not going to do the Christmas movie debate because it's not a debate. It's just like how a hot dog is not. It's a sandwich. Like, you can't go through the sequence of Die Hard without it being Christmas. There's no reason John McClane would be flying out for a Halloween party or a summer solstice. He's
Right.
there for the Christmas party.
Christmas party.
Meanwhile, ho ho ho! Now I have a gun. It's a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
I saw somebody on social posted a zoomed-in photo where Sylvester Stallone and Rambo at the police station. There's a desk Christmas tree in the background of the shot. So
Really?
maybe Rambo, add that to the Christmas movie list. Nick Ferguson, you'll have to inspect that for me.
Well, I got another one for you too. It's unaccompanied minors.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
All I can really add to the conversation is like the one that we do pretty much every year. It's a little iffy with the small kids and limited TV time. A lot of Bing Crosby movies. So White Christmas,
Yeah.
The Bells of St. Mary's are 2 classic ones. You have to, force a little bit of the Catholic guilt in with your Christmas viewing. That's just part of the experience. But you can miss me with It's a Wonderful Life. We don't have enough time to get into that podcast, but there's a reason why it's so popular. But it's because it was critically panned and dismissed as just television filler.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, sign me up for Muppets Christmas Carol. That's a staple. That's an institution in the Hardy household.
Muppets Christmas Carol. Okay.
That's right. With Gonzo as Charles Dickens himself.
Okay. Well, there's another one. The Nightmare Before Christmas. My kids love that. Yes.
Yep. You get to bring it out during September and watch it all the way through at the end of the year.
Yes.
So look, that's how you would describe the football season, right? You bring it out in September and you cover it through the rest of the year, and we'll be there along the way. Again, Nick Ferguson, 10 years in the National Football League, based in Denver. So any questions or anything you want to follow up on the Denver Broncos, any other team in the league, he's there for you at Nick Ferguson _25. I'm Alex Hardy. Again, we are those guys. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll keep the holiday fun a little mixed in as we continue along. Because, Nick, I got to get those, before we get on out of here, you got to give me that recipe for your cookies, your Christmas cookies.
Well, I don't have a recipe for Christmas cookies. My kids normally bake the cookies, and they do a great job. So I'm looking forward to that.
2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar.
No.
That's how it starts. That's how
Well,
every Nick Ferguson recipe starts.
here's what I would tell you before we go. I know it's a colder months. It gets colder in California where you are, not so much where I am as far as the snow is concerned. You don't get it. So I recommend to all those people who are in those cold weather places, remember, that's not an icy. It is called yellow snow. Don't eat it.